Good afternoon. After speaking with so many of you over the last couple of weeks, I decided to add some quick videos for those who do not like to read my rather long-winded emails. Although I will say, I will continue to write my emails and blogs and everything else I do, but I figured we'd give video a shot for those of you who would rather listen to it in the background or sit at your computer for a couple of minutes every day. So my goal is to do a series of short videos because I know you don't want to sit there and listen to me for 30 to 40 or 50 minutes or longer. So this is video shot number one. We'll see how it goes. As always, as you know, please feel free to call or text or email me with questions, comments, or concerns. First and foremost, I hope you and your families are safe and healthy, because at the end of the day, there's nothing more important than your health. So above all else, please, everyone says it already now, but please stay safe. For this video, I just want to talk about a couple of kind of big picture things. I have a long and growing list of topics that people have asked about, and I'm going to try to address them over the course of this week and next week. So the first question is, which kind of leads me into everything else, many people and clients have asked, how do I get through these kinds of stressful and anxiety-filled events? My answer is, as many of you can imagine, I don't want to be cavalier about it, because most of you know me pretty well. That's not my personality. I am definitely not cavalier, but also I've been doing this a long time, 31 years. This is not my first rodeo. And when I counted up how many kind of big picture events I've gone through in my career, there's been 7 other ones. And each one at the time you go through it is traumatic and it's stressful. And this one may be a little bit different because it's not only our money we're talking about, but it's also our health. And we haven't had really a major health scare in what I would say the modern era. So I get it. When I look back at my career, you know, my first event, if you will, was the crash of '87. Now, I was a senior in college at the time, so I wasn't exactly working, but I had all my eggs in one single stocks basket, and my family was in the industry, and I remember vividly the stock market crashing. I was following the markets at the time, and I remember calling my father and saying, can I afford to stay in school? Can the family still pay for college? Lucky for me, my parents had already paid for my senior year, so that wasn't an issue, but my brother was a freshman, and I remember my dad saying to me, we'll see. And that was the first time I can remember my dad not being just exuberantly confident about our finances when he said, we'll see. So that definitely led me to pause. That was probably the biggest single market event I lived through. And 08 was a much longer term thing, 07 to 09. From there, I was in the business working at Shearson Lehman, or Lehman at the time, 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait. Same time we had the S&L crisis, savings and loan crisis, and oil at that time had spiked to $40 plus a barrel, which was unheard of in those days. It was normally a $10 a barrel commodity. We got through that. 1998, we had 2 major world events, which don't seem that big right now. We had long-term capital management, and we had Russia defaulting on our debt at the end of August of 98, which caused the markets to implode, if you will. And then just 2 months later, long-term capital, this hedge fund of PhDs and geniuses, literally took down the entire financial system. And if it wasn't for the Wall Street banks getting together and deciding to do a rescue with the Fed, who knows what would have happened. Only a couple of years later, the dot-com bubble burst, and we look back on it and say, sure, everyone knew it was going to eventually burst, but at the time, so many little investors, small investors, had dumped so much money into all these fly-by-night companies. Forget about profits, but they had no revenue either. Most were trading on a concept. 1 year later, which was, I think, the big one of my career, and that was 9/11, which I'll get to shortly. Then, as we all know, we had 2007 to 2009, the great financial crisis and serious recession that accompanied that. And before the corona crisis, we had the 2011 crisis, which a lot of people don't realize how important and how big it was. The US's debt got downgraded from AAA. It never happened before. And we also had Greece, which obviously a tiny country, how big could it have been? But Greece was on the verge of defaulting and taking down Europe with it, which would have been an enormous event. In any case, I know a lot of those, what I just mentioned, those crises don't amount to much as you sit here today. I mean, clearly the markets were down from high to low, roughly 32%, like they've been many times before. But the difference now is there's a health crisis attached to it. And people, you read the news, you turn the TV on, it's dire after dire. And when you add in your finances on it, it is, totally understand, it's well-founded why people have a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety. But let me say this, those of you who know me a long time, and even those who don't, know I'm a fairly positive person. I like to laugh, I like to smile, I like to socialize a lot. We got through World War I, we got through World War II, we got through civil unrest in the late 60s, early 70s, and we survived terrorists flying huge jet airliners into the tallest buildings in our biggest city. So when people say to me, I don't think we're going to make it through this, I think this is the end of capitalism, and I don't mean to put anyone down, but that's nonsense. One thing we know about the United States and our citizens is that we and they and all of us are incredibly resilient. With each crisis comes opportunity. Life will change a little bit, but I would absolutely not bet against the United States. I think time and time again, those who have been proven wrong in amazingly glorious fashion. They've been wrong. So I don't think it's time to bet against the US. This is not 2008, let alone a repeat of the Great Depression, as some have suggested. So remember, 2008 was so long and so deep and so troublesome because it struck at the core of our banking system. Back then, the banks had very little capital left. They were living on borrowed money, and they invested in all these things that they knew nothing about. Today, if you fast forward through some smart regulation, I would argue the banks are overcapitalized. The banks have too much money. We're not worried about the banks defaulting. We're not worried about the bank's solvency. If the banks want to lend money, there's plenty of money to lend. So I'm not really worried about this becoming a financial crisis or banking crisis. That's not where we are today. And the Great Depression, I completely and utterly dismiss. That was the perfect storm of perfect storms. That is it possible? Again, anything is possible. However, the Great Depression, first of all, people were borrowing 95 cents for every dollar they invested. That was problem number one in 1929. In 1930, the US passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, putting tariffs on global goods around the country. As the economy began to weaken in 1930, Hoover and the prevailing sentiment at the time was, we have to balance the budget, we have to be fiscally prudent, we must stay on the gold standard. And that just unraveled and snowballed into a global sovereign debt crisis. In other words, countries around the world were defaulting on their debt. And then one after another bad thing led to unemployment in the 20+% at the same time when we had major drought in the middle of the country and our food supply was in jeopardy. So, and then markets rallied and the economy came back, and we had a second Great Depression that began in 1937, which ended with World War II. I'm not going to go into that right now. So I don't believe that we are on the precipice of a true banking crisis or some kind of Great Depression. And frankly, depression was a term never used before 1931. In 1931, the recession got so deep, they couldn't find a word to use. So they said it wasn't a recession, it was a depression. But there's no textbook definition for what a depression is. I mean, I would just say it is an extended period, more than 2 years, of a contracting economy with skyrocketing unemployment. I think what we're facing now is a short-term period where the economy literally ran into a brick wall in, well, let's just say March 1st. Unemployment is going to skyrocket as we're seeing right now. But I would be very, 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 very shocked if this turned into something much grander because of, which I'll talk about in another video, what's going on with Congress, the Treasury, and the Fed. So our economy is always evolving. I mean, just think 25 years ago, what would have happened if you or your boss said, I want you to work from home, or we're going to have you work from home? People would say, no chance, no way. Who would work from home? I mean, I know when I work from home, I just run to the refrigerator every hour and I literally would weigh about 300 pounds. But back then, they would say, there's no oversight. We can't look after you. What's happening now? People are figuring out how to work from home pretty efficiently. So the workforce is always evolving, and our economy is always evolving, and it will continue to evolve. So I'll close with this. After 9/11 hit, that clearly hit home for me. I'd worked in the city for 5 years, and I had countless friends working in the towers during that time and around the towers. So it certainly was a more personal event for me. But think about what happened after 9/11. The masses were all leaving the big cities. Nobody was going to live in the big cities anymore. People from New York were running to northern New England. Home sales in Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine skyrocketed. Nobody was ever going to rent an office in a high-rise building again. Who in the right mind would want to work in a high-rise building in New York after 2 planes took down the most iconic buildings on earth? And what developer would ever build a huge skyscraper again? Because there wasn't going to be any demand for it, and they'd have to give it away to get you to rent there. Well, that was less than 20 years ago. And it wasn't too long after that where all of a sudden the cities were inundated with people again. The boomers are moving to the big cities. The millennials are moving to the big cities. The developers couldn't build buildings tall enough anymore. If you go to Manhattan a month ago, there are cranes everywhere. They can't build enough tall buildings. So in this case, although we think life will never be the same again, and it may not perfectly replicate how it was a month ago, we do have short memories with our behavior. We won't forget 9/11. We won't forget the corona crisis, but whatever happens going forward, we will live better lives, we'll be more aware, and things will return to a new sense of normalcy. And I'll close by reiterating what I already said. Do not bet against America. Do not bet against people living in this country. It has never worked in our history, and I would argue that it never will work. So I thank you for your time. This went on longer than I thought. What a shock, because I don't know how to spell the word brevity, but I'll be back tomorrow or the next day as I am figuring out how to end this and post it. So again, any questions, comments, concerns, please call me, please text me, please email me. I'm happy to do a Zoom like this meeting with you, or we can get on Skype or anything else. But I'm here in the office every day. Renee is working from home. So we're social distancing, making sure that we are staying as healthy as possible. And I hope you are as well. Thanks for watching, and look forward to catching up soon.